So if everyone is sitting comfortably, I'll start to go through these. I'll just go through them as they're listed on my screen with no particular sorting. Also, I'm not very good at short answers, so be prepared for that. So the first one, question. What is the difference between awareness / being aware and attention / paying attention? Well, it depends a bit on how you use the words, but I use them a bit elastically, but attention is more of a functional quality. So in Pali, it's called manasikara. So like a bird is paying attention when it's coming up to the bird feeder. The average car driver is paying attention when they come up to a crossroads, a junction, to see if the light's going to change and so on. So attention is an important function, a cognitive function, but it's not particularly liberating in and of itself. It's one of the aspects of like mental activity, mental function. So it's important as a component of liberation, but it's not a liberating quality in and of itself. So that's attention, manasikara. So when I use the word awareness, then I'm usually taking that to mean more a transcendent quality of knowing. So the Pali word vicca is often what I'm using as a sort of what I'm thinking of in the background if I use the word awareness, or particularly awakened awareness. So that's an intrinsically liberating quality. It's a transcendent wisdom. So that is, it would incorporate attention, but it would be bigger than that, because it's also including the qualities of recognizing that this is a mental event. Like here we are sitting in our various places, looking at our various screens with different people around us, other humans, dogs, cactuses, etc., etc. I've got pigeons out in the garden here at Amaravati, that I can hear in the background. So we can say, oh, here we are in Ireland, in England, in California, in Alberta, or wherever we might be, London, and yet all of this is a collection of mental events. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. This is all happening within our minds. I'm not saying that we're dreaming everything into existence, but you are putting together your version of the world through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking, and remembering and imagining. That's not that's not really negotiable. That's how we put together our experience of the world. So none of us experiences the world. We each experience our version of the world as it's taking shape in each moment. So awareness, awakened awareness, is including that quality of, oh, this is a fabricated subjective event. This isn't the reality. This is my mind's version of reality. So it's seeing and appreciating the process of experiencing, as well as focusing on the particular content of an experience. So attention would be looking at the content of experience, and awareness, or awakened awareness, that's appreciating the process of experiencing as well as the content of any one experience. I hope that doesn't sound too technical, but it's why the quality of awareness, or vicca, that it's intrinsically liberating, because it's that which enables the appreciation of the empty, transient, and ownerless quality of everything that's experienced. Whereas if we're just paying attention, then it's much easier for the mind to get caught up in me and mine, you and them, here and there, inside and outside, and making those into solid realities. That makes sense? I don't know who asked each. There aren't any names on the questions, quite appropriately, but hopefully that is, let's say, responding to the question, and that makes provides meaningful information to the person who asked the question. That's my hope. Okay, let's go to question number 2. I worry about my hyperactive mind, and I've been meditating for 10 years. I've heard teachers saying that people can sit for years in meditation and get no wisdom or ability for concentration. I'm afraid this has happened to me, ... That I do not see any improvements in my hyperactive mind and have just been sitting aimlessly on a cushion for 10 years. Thank you, Ajahn. Well, I'm not sure who asked the question, but this is not an uncommon experience. But I would also not just be looking on the bright side, but appearances can be deceptive. And sometimes what's happening on the surface level is not what's happening in the whole system. And so the Buddha gave a really good example. He said, you can't really see the changes that are made through practicing Dhamma day by day. So it's like a carpenter. If a carpenter gets a new saw or an adze, that and there's a brand new tool, they can't tell how much of the handle is worn away each day. But when the carpenter's been using the saw for 5 years or 10 years, then the imprint of their fingers is there in the handle. You can't say how much has been worn away, how much has changed each day, but oh look, this is my handprint is there on the handle of this tool. It's worn into it. And so that sometimes, even though at the surface level, when we look at the mind, oh, the mind's still chattering, it's so busy, and we make these judgments at one level. And again, I don't know who asked the question, I don't know what the whole picture is, but sometimes there can be quite radical changes going on in the background that we don't notice because of the attention being caught by the surface level activity. So if you have a style of life, you've got a job where you have to engage with a lot of people, you've got a large family around you, you're on a farm with 50 animals, then it's natural for the mind to have to think a lot and to create yourself as a person and to engage. So the resonances at the end of a day are going to be quite complicated and personal, because that's the sort of the ripples of the effect of being in an office or hanging out with the 8 members of your family, or looking after the farm. And so that's what's happening on the surface level. But often, if and you can do this exercise for yourselves, if you look back 5 years, 10 years, so this person said they've been meditating for 10 years. So if you look back, okay, 10 years ago, if somebody insulted you, what would happen? And if somebody insults you now, what happens? If somebody praised you 10 years ago, what happened? If somebody praises you now, what happens? If you book a ticket on a train or a plane, and you're expecting to travel, and you get to the train station or the airport, and they say, "Oh, sorry, the flight's been cancelled. That train's not going. Your ticket is not valid." What happens? 10 years ago, what would have happened? And now, what happens? So oftentimes, and again, I can't read anybody's mind. I'm just making presumptions here. But often, when we look at that broader picture, I mean, oh my goodness, actually, that's true. I think I am a bit more patient. I'm a bit more, adaptable. I'm less reactive. I can deal with people criticizing or praising me. If people praise me, I don't get drunk on it. If people criticize me, I don't break into a million pieces. Oh, that changed. It might be that at the surface level, there's still just yak going on at the sort of everyday level of mental activity. but important and very real changes can be happening in the background. So that's I would say those are non-trivial improvements. So it can be very deceptive. Also, there are, if you read the stories of the enlightened disciples of the Buddha, some of them, there's one monk who made the comment, 25 years I've been a monk and not a finger snap of peace. So that's accompanied by a feeling of a pretty substantial despair and self-criticism, and yet living with the Buddha, the Buddha's alive and teaching, and you're his disciple, and you've been a monk for 25 years, and 25 years, not a finger snap of peace. But then that particular monk realized, well, even though my mind's just been jabbering away for 25 years, I've been trying, I've been making the effort, I've been really sincere, doing what I can to work with this life, with this mind. Wow, that's quite extraordinary. Oh, yeah, and then that feeling of in a sense, rejoicing in his own say commitment, his own say resolution to try and work with his mind, and to be say scrupulous with his training and making good effort. That welled up in him, and then he became an arahant right there, just on the spot. I won't guarantee that's what will happen to any of you, but that these stories are reliable. They're very human, particularly if you read the stories of the in the Theravada tradition. They're very human, they're very realistic and relatable stories. So I would encourage to not be too disappointed or say too easily taken in by that quality of people saying, I'm sitting for years and getting no wisdom or ability to concentrate. I wouldn't say that's everything. I remember many years ago, Ajahn Sumedho told the story how when he was first teaching in London in the 1970s, there was one of the regular visitors at the Hampstead Vihara, and she'd been a meditator for years, and she had the same kind of question. I get home after work and I sit down to meditate, and it's just this ceaseless inner chatter, and so Ajahn Sumedho didn't know her very well. He only just sort of met her in the recent weeks. He was advising this and advising that, and then he said, "What kind of work do you do?" And she said, "Oh, I'm a telephonist." Those of you, I see there's a few grey-headed folks out there like myself. Remember what telephonists were. It's a kind of doesn't really happen nowadays. But that was a person who received a phone call and then took an electric cable and plugged it into a socket to for the person who was going to receive the call. So that's called a switchboard. So there was someone working as a telephonist on a switchboard, and so that was her working life. 8-10 hours a day in a switchboard with bells going off and having to plug the right wire into the right socket. And he said, "Well, no wonder your mind is a bit busy in the evening. You should be surprised if it isn't." Because that's the natural result of what your day is filled with. So don't take that as a defilement or a problem. It's just the ripples of the day. If you've been having to process a lot of information, make a lot of decisions, get things right, and there's a lot of voices and bells going off and a lot of responsibility, that has its effect. So don't ignore that. So I would be encouraging, and even if the mind is hyperactive, it's not something you have to look upon as an enemy or as a problem, but you can make friends with that. Because particularly in relationship to thought, the two essential insights are our thoughts are not true, they're not absolute facts, and they're not ours. So just like I can hear the ripples of the water in the pond outside my door, the fountain goes off, and there's a sound, but the water, the sound of the water doesn't have any meaning. It's just the sound of splashing water. That's all. So we can relate to our own thoughts just as the ripples of our mind, just the reverberations of the day. And so I often encourage people to recognize that so much of our suffering comes from taking all our thoughts to be absolute facts. Even if the things that we think now are opposite to what we thought this morning, we still believe it. We think it was true this morning, and we still think it's true this afternoon, even if the thoughts are saying opposite things. Do you follow me? If we think it, we assume it's true. That's crazy. When I lived in the Bay Area, in San Francisco area, they have a fondness for philosophical bumper stickers. And one of the ones you would see from time to time was, just because you think it, it doesn't mean it's true, which I thought was very, very helpful, very profound. So that was a little bit of San Francisco Bay Area wisdom. Just because you think it, it doesn't mean it's true. And so if you step back from believing all your thoughts, even if there is a lot of them, like the sound of the fountain might be quite loud, so big deal. It's just a lot of noise going on. It's like having a lot of traffic outside your window. If you live on a busy street, there's traffic noise. That's where you live. So get triple glazing if you can. But if you can't, it's just noise. You don't have to make much of it. So our thoughts are not true, and they're not ours. Just like we see visual forms. We see colors and shapes. We see a cloud or the sky or the computer screen. We might say, well, yeah, that's my computer. But do you say that's my blue or my yellow or my red, or that's my oval shape, or that's, I don't own your faces. I can see your faces, but I don't own them. But we take thoughts very much as ours. There's a sense of ownership. There's an owning self in relationship. So to change the attitude towards thinking, to recognize these thoughts are not true, they're not absolute facts, and they're not ours. They're patterns in nature arising and passing away, and they're like this. We don't have to make anything of them. And then even if there is a lot of thinking, it's not so intrusive. It's just like having windy weather or loud traffic noise or active neighbors. Yeah, it's or like if you're in Asia, I saw somebody's got Bangkok on their screen. I don't know whether they're really living there or that's just a label on their box. But in Thailand, every night, particularly in the forest, the air is filled with the sound of insects. It's a real racket. So meditating at night in Thailand is really noisy, just from the reverberation of the forest. But you don't give meaning to the sound of the crickets. They're just the crickets doing their thing. They might have their own meanings, but for humans, it's just the crickets. So if we just change the attitude towards thinking, it can be a lot less oppressive. Okay, so question number 3. Ajahn, I've been meditating a long time and I've been on many retreats, and yet when I hear talks or teachings, I feel I'm hearing things for the first time. I do not seem to be able to retain the teachings. Well, again, this is not an uncommon experience. In one of his Dhamma talks, Ajahn Chah spoke about this. He said, oftentimes you can be sitting in a Dhamma talk and you're listening really closely and you're really appreciating the talk, and then the talk finishes and you go out and somebody says, oh, what was the talk about? And you go, and you can't remember a thing. It's like it's all gone. But Ajahn Chah would say, but you've got like an internal tape recorder, so that when you need the wisdom that was there in the talk, then you'll be able to draw upon it. It's just not immediately accessible to that part of the brain that likes to remember things. Some people do have that faculty. I'll give credit for that. But oftentimes, when you're really listening closely to a Dhamma talk, that in a way that reflective, non-critical, open mode of attention, of awareness, if you like, it's say maybe it goes into the mind and is retained in a different way than just collecting information, like remembering what time the train goes, or you know, what somebody asked you to do when you chatted over breakfast today. It's sort of a different way of receiving it. But anyway, that's how Ajahn Chah described it, which I thought was really helpful. And he said that you know, and he made the comment, there was a tape recorder that was recording his words. That's how he got into the Dhamma book. He said, you know, we've got these external tape recorders, but each one of us has one of these in our own hearts, in our own minds. And so if you're really listening, then the wisdom that you need, it'll be there when you call upon it. And so so again, I wouldn't worry too much about that. Also, hearing things for the first time, you know, that's also not uncommon. You know, so when it was Ajahn Chah's 100th anniversary of his birth a couple of years ago in 2018. So we produced a new edition of six books of his. You know, 5 ones that had been done before, and 1 new one that we put together. And so the books like Bodhinyana, Taste of Freedom, that some of you might be familiar with. So we were producing this new edition, and so we were trying to do them all from the original printing. And so I was reading this copy of this text from Bodhinyana, and I thought, this isn't the first edition. I haven't seen this before. That, you know, where did this come from? Who put this in here? You know, it was like something that was completely new to me. It was very insightful and kind of interesting, but I thought, that was never there before. So I went back to my 1981 edition of Bodhinyana, fished it off my shelf, opened it up. There it is on the page. And I thought, wow, it was there all along. How did I not see that before? So sometimes we are just hearing things in a different way, that we have changed. And so that wasn't a unique experience. That's happened a few times, even with my own stuff, even with my own books. It's like, did I say that? No, I never said that. Where did that come from? And you go back and look at the original. Oh my goodness, that was me. That's quite good. So, it can be pleasantly surprising. So don't worry too much about not having sort of perfect recall and total retention, because sometimes the same words that in a way you have heard before, you haven't really heard them before, because the mind that was receiving them wasn't the same as the mind that's receiving them and knowing them today. The things have moved along, and so that it's like Ajahn Sumedho lives here now, and so he's giving talks every week. And you know, I've heard probably hundreds of thousands of talks of his over the years. But even now, today, when you're listening to him saying, you know, this is the way it is, it's this way, you can still, you know, I've heard him say that thousands of times, and yet you can be sitting there and hear him say, right. And there's some way that's not quite the same as him saying, this is the way it is, the other, you know, 2,485 times that you've heard it. So I would say that freshness of appreciation is something to rejoice in, rather than feeling it's a problem with memory loss. I do tend to look on the bright side of things. I'm a perennial optimist, but I don't feel that's necessarily a problem. So the next one says, is it okay to put my question up here? I hope they got the answer yes. Question. During my meditation, my body begins to spontaneously circle on the sits bones. I'm wondering what this is about. Well, yeah, those kind of things happen. I used to have a lot of that in the early years. Involuntary movement of various kinds. In the yoga tradition, there's that kind of involuntary movement is called kriya, K-R-I-Y-A. So probably a few yoga teachers amongst you there, kriya. So it's as far as I understand it, it's a kind of byproduct of the psychophysical energy system, like the chi or the prana in the system. And when you concentrate the mind, I would say, particularly if the whole system is not very well integrated, then you get these spontaneous movements. So I used to get them quite dramatically, and to the point that I actually had to leave retreat at one point because of the kind of drama. I won't go into details, but it was like, I think I better go and meditate by myself in my, or Ajahn Amaro said, you better meditate by yourself in your kuti, in your hut. But it's nothing to worry about. It's a side effect of concentration practice, I would say, and that what I found, and you can experiment with it, but what I found for myself was the more I was interested in it, so this is some kind of a strange thing or an interesting thing or an exciting thing that's happening, a weird thing, and it's happening to me. This is my mind, my experience. This is something that I'm experiencing. The more there was a sense of me, the experience of me, the owner, me, the one who's having this kind of experience, then they would be quite intense. And to my surprise, when I started to use more of a reflective attitude and to really not trying to suppress those movements or the kind of energy, because the mind would be quite bright, quite energized, quite alert in those when those states would happen. If I use develop the insight into not self, like who is it, asking questions like who is it that's experiencing this? Who does this body belong to? Who is aware of this? What is it that knows this? Then supporting the quality of not self, the insight into not self, then I'd find immediately the whole system would sort of come into a much more integrated state. The movements would stop, and my body would just sit in a natural, upright, very alert way, which surprised me at first. But I could see that that selfing around those experiences exacerbated and intensified them, and when there was a letting go of them and non-identification with them, and just letting them be sort of known as a sort of natural product of the meditation, then things came into balance, and the effect of that was a real brightening of the mind. I was doing quite a bit of hatha yoga in those days. I had a whole sort of daily yoga routine, so that also was something that I think was tending to release or sort of support the development of a lot of energy in the system, a lot of prana. So that's my understanding of that. So I wouldn't worry too much. That's my reading of it. But if you have whoever's asking the question, if you have a yoga teacher, or if you are a yoga teacher, then if you ask about Kriya, then that might give you, or you can Google it probably, that might give you a bit of an insight into it. That said, some traditions say, oh, this is really good, this means you're enlightened, or this is a kind of great spiritual power. I would politely park all of that kind of commentary around that. I would say it's really just a natural product of the mental physical system, and that you don't have to read any kind of sort of spiritual excellence into it. It's just it's the energy of the living system, and it's this way. So I wouldn't read too much into it, or it's a sign of incipient or actual enlightenment. I would say no, it's just involuntary body movements, that's all. That's my reading on that one. Okay, next one. I'll go ahead and hope for the best. I'm almost afraid to ask the question. But particularly during this time of the pandemic, my instinct was and is to keep in touch. Yes, that looks like part of a question rather than a whole question. So maybe it's related to the next bit. Is that right, Elaine?
Ajahn, I think the question is that that the person was nervous about asking the question because it touches a part of their their daily approach to life in general, and
Uh-huh.
particularly at this time, they were saying that they're reaching out to people more, family and friends more, and but it's also sort of, you know, kind of meeting a loneliness and something within them. So they were wondering about, you know, interconnectedness, and I'm trying to find the question here, but
So that particular piece is related to the question below it. That's
yeah,
on my screen. Okay, so it's the same person.
yeah,
It looks like it sort of broke off in mid-sentence there.
yeah.
Okay.
I might not have formulated it properly. Sorry, Ajahn.
That's all right. Okay, so the question is, I'm always afraid to ask this question because it goes quite deep for me in how I approach life. I have particularly during this time been trying to reach out and keep in close contact with family and friends in a deeper way through this. I feel loved, and it balances with that sense of dread and anxiety of not being able to cope. Is that sense of connectedness? How real is it? There is interdependence, ... and yet we are also so individual in our experience and understanding of life. Can we really ever touch each other in mind and body, leading to looking at aloneness? And the synopsis is interdependence, but the illusion of connectedness, our aloneness in our life experience. So there's a few things there. I'll try to address my sort of understanding of that. So I would say on the human level, on the condition level, I mean, like we use the word sangha. Sangha means community, and so that quality of connectedness and relatedness is extremely important. Like the Buddha, the reason why we have Buddhism in the world today, 2,500 years after the Buddha's life, is because of the sangha that he established. That's how the vehicle has traveled. It's been the vehicle that has carried the teaching through these 25 centuries, I would say, in great part. So that quality of community and relating to others and spiritual friendship, the Buddha numerous times said, you know, that's the most important thing. As he said to Ananda, when Ananda said, I think spiritual friendship is half the holy life, the Buddha said, no, not so, Ananda, it's the whole of the holy life. So on a human level, you know, the Buddha put so much effort into establishing the community of his students, the monastic community, the lay community, what's called the fourfold assembly, the Buddha Parisa, that he put a huge amount of effort in his 45 years of teaching into establishing that sense of communal effort and communal support, and then making statements like, you know, the spiritual friendship is the whole of the holy life, not half of it. And then also the Mangala Sutta begins with the words, not to associate with fools, but to associate with the wise. This is the highest blessing. The conditions, I can go through the whole set of lists. The first of the conditions for stream entry, supportive of stream entry, is sapurisa sangseva, spending time with good people, drawing close to sapurisa, to good people. So it makes a difference on a very practical, real human level. And so that I would say that the effort that you've been making in order to connect with others and to relate to others in a meaningful way, yeah, well, very good, sadhu. That's something very skillful and wholesome. Because on one level, on the level of our sort of conditioned existences in the human world, we need that. That's important. That's a non-trivial element of our life. But there are a few people that really don't need anybody else, that have got such an innate spiritual maturity that they really don't need any kind of to be buoyed up or to be supported by others. But I think that's like 1 in 100 million, or maybe 1 in a billion. Really, I mean, it's like that rare, I would say, my rough estimate of the picture. And being, I've been around in the sort of spiritual domain for a few years, so I'd say it's like 1 in 100 million, maybe, 1,000 million. That, yeah, you really get someone who's so spiritually rich from the get-go. They don't need, and they're not benefited by anything from external contact with family or friends or spiritual teachers or anything. They are, just add hot water and serve, as they say, pre-cooked. But that's very, very rare. And the other, 999 million of us, we need each other. And the Buddha was incredibly practical. So it was, I feel, that sense of emphasizing community and how much we can benefit each other, the impact that we can have upon each other, because it's not just us being helped by the people around us, but we can help others that are close to us. He called the keeping the 5 precepts. Like, we began the day by taking the precepts. We might think of the precepts as a set of limitations. You can't, you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that, shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. He also called the 5 precepts the 5 great gifts, the mahadana. So this, because if you keep the 5 precepts, then you grant immeasurable, incalculable freedom from fear, freedom from distress, freedom from anxiety to other beings around you. If you're keeping the precepts, people don't have to be afraid that you're going to attack them. You're not going to steal from them. You're not going to flirt with them. You're not going to lie to them. You're not trying to get anything from them in any kind of unskillful or unwholesome way. So it's called abhayadana, the giving of fearlessness. So that's something that we give to others around us, so that the benefits of that wholesome relatedness go in both directions. We are supported by the good-hearted and helpful people around us, and we provide support to those around us through our own efforts. So I would say that kind of connectedness is not illusory, but I would say it is only part of the picture, because we have the conditioned dimension of our nature, and there's also the unconditioned. And so that like in one of the attributes of the Buddha is Vijja Charana Sampanno, that when we do the chanting, if we were all together and doing the chanting together, if we were physically at Sunyata for this retreat, we would be chanting together. And one of the attributes of the Buddha that we will be reciting morning and evening is Vijja Charana Sampanno. So Vijja is awakened awareness, Charana is conduct, and Sampanno means accomplished or fulfilled in or consummate in those qualities. So that represents these 2 attributes of the Buddha, that they're both totally attuned to the world and the conditioned realm, and attuned to the realm of other beings, and the world of sense contact and beings and activity. But then it's also the Buddha nature is equally transcendent. The Vijja aspect represents that transcendent wisdom that is totally transcendent of the world. So the Charana represents total attunement to the world, and the Vijja represents a total transcendence of the world. And those 2 qualities don't conflict with each other. They're both embodied in the Buddha, and that also that's represented in our own minds, our own hearts, that quality of awakened awareness, a capacity that we have to be awake, to be aware. Then it brings both of those qualities together. So on the level of charana, yes, level of conduct and our connection as human beings with the living world, yeah, there's a total relatedness, and that matters, that makes a difference. On the level of Vijja, then the important aspect of that is not self, is that the appearance of being a living being who was born, who exists in space and time, these are recognized as appearances, that you can't, when we look at the ultimate reality of what we are, unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed, it's not connected to time, it's not connected to identity, it's not connected to space. That when the heart is truly liberated, it lets go of identity, it lets go of time, it lets go of space. It's unlocated, timeless, selfless reality. So that's kind of mind-blowing and unimaginable in terms of our sense world, but that's why liberation is possible, is because there is this dimension of our being which is not limited by time or space or individuality. And so in that respect, on the side of Vijja, then there is a profound independence, a profound sort of freedom from reliance on anything, on people, food, air, time, space, anything. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I feel that's also important to understand. There's our lives as human beings functions essentially on these two levels. We have the mundane, conditioned, worldly aspects of our faces, our names, our ages, our genders, our nationalities, and those conventions, the sense world. But there's also this dimension of our being, which is unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed, with that transcendent quality. And as the Buddha said, there is the unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed. And if there was not, there would be no hope for liberation from the born, the originated, the created, the formed. But because there is the unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed, therefore, liberation is possible from the born, the originated, the created, and the formed. So that's why enlightenment is possible, liberation is possible. That and so that to the rational mind, it might seem, well, either we are these human beings and these bodies and these minds are who and what we are, or they're not. But it's more of a both and rather than an either or, if that makes sense. And that so much of the way of the Buddha is it's like developing what you can call binocular vision. You know, when you both your eyes are working, then you can see in 3D. So you have one eye which says everything matters, everything, you know, the sense world is real, and then the other eye is saying everything is empty, and the sense world is void of substance, and everything matters, nothing matters. And so that even though these might seem contradictory, like the left eye and the right eye, or the left hand and the right hand, in some ways they're opposites, and in some ways they're identical. But when they work together, when your eyes work together, then you can see in 3 dimensions. So I feel this is part of understanding what we mean by the middle way, is that 3-dimensional vision, that sense of the appreciation of both the mundane and the transcendent, the seeing things from the conditioned perspective and the unconditioned perspective, and not just say choosing one over the other, if one could do that, but rather the way of the Buddha, I feel, is the way that those qualities are integrated. So the Buddha was, as he said himself, born in the world, but through the enlightenment, totally transcended the world. But after the enlightenment, the Buddha didn't just evaporate or disappear or remain disconnected, but he traveled for 45 years around Northeast India, teaching and establishing the Dhamma and the Sangha, so that transcendent wisdom was interfaced with the living world, and then took shape in terms of teachings and practices that we've inherited today. And so that in this question, I feel it's sort of it's a touching on both of those elements of, yes, on the level of our existence as human beings, friends matter, people matter, those connections. It's a relational practice, and that matters, that makes a difference. But on the level of wisdom, then there's a quality of total independence, freedom, as the Buddha called it, a freedom from reliance. The heart does not depend on anything, because essentially in that ultimate level, our own heart, our own mind is Dhamma. You know, the mind is Dhamma, it's not a person. And what does the Dhamma need to sustain itself? What can it lose? What can it get? It's like those words don't apply. So there's a profound independence, a profound freedom from reliance, as the Buddha put it. And so it might seem paradoxical, like, well, you know, surely it's either one or the other. But that paradox and those kind of differences of perspective, that's really the flavor of Buddha Dhamma. Maybe the last thing to say on this is many years ago, when Ajahn Sumedho was a young monk, one day Ajahn Chah said to him, you know, Sumedho, you must be confused. And he thought, oh, am I looking particularly confused today? He said, and they said, well, why is that, Luang Por? He said, well, the Vinaya, the monastic discipline, is all about holding on. Do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. But the Dhamma is all about letting go. So isn't that confusing? He said, actually, yeah, now you come to mention it, that is, yeah, that is kind of strange. And he thought that Ajahn Chah was going to launch into a Dhamma talk to explain yeah, how it all operated. But all Ajahn Chah said to him was, when you figure out how that works, you'll be fine. That was it. That was the end of the teaching. So I see a few more questions have come in, but it's now 4:30 here in Amaravati. So let's leave those remaining questions till tomorrow, if that's okay. And we'll have a sitting for half an hour to close the day. Let all those words reverberate. So please stretch your legs for a bit, take a 5 minutes to move around and do what you need to do, and then we can gather back for a sitting, and then we'll close at 5 o'clock today, 5 o'clock UK time. This brings our Saturday to a close here in Ireland, UK. It's just before 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I encourage everyone in the spirit of the day to carry on through your evening and the rest of the day that you have, just employing the same kind of principles that I've been talking about today, just to the extent possible, to see if you can carry out your activities and your conversations and do what you need to do, but guided by mindfulness and wisdom and attuned awareness, rather than me having to do something to get somewhere, and to notice that contrast between acting from self-view and acting from a nature-centered or Dhamma-centered viewpoint. That the more that we can get a feel for the contrast between those two, and then to learn to choose how to act and speak and engage from a basis of attunement to nature, to reality, then to see the results of that, to recognize that, and to let that speak for itself. When we let go of having to act from self-view, what I should do, what I want to do, what I've got to do, what I don't want to do, all those all that I making and mind making, notice the stressfulness, the pressure in the heart from that. And when the action, speech, and attitude is guided by a mindfulness and wisdom, by that attuned quality of awareness, notice what that's like, and to let the effects of that have their own impact, that be what guides us. So please have a good evening and the remainder of this day, and I look forward to seeing everybody 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Irish time, UK time, and whatever part of the planet you're on at that time, and look forward to seeing you all then.